Hello and welcome to our download of our recent close on a refinance on a property in the Panhandle of Florida. You know that Old Capital does a lot of business in Texas, but I am here, Julie with Old Capital, to tell you that there is life outside of Texas. We do lots of multifamily in different areas. And so I wanted to visit with you today and share with you some of the challenges while we've been busy trying to get through COVID, but some of the challenges that go along with getting the finance through an agency debt. So today I wanted to kind of go through our recent close with Jennifer ONeal from ITW Consulting. Good morning, Jennifer. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Julie. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, can you tell us a little bit about ITW Consulting?
Sure. It's a company that I formed basically about a couple of years ago to help me with the property management and asset management that I work with syndications on apartment buildings. Basically, I'm based in California, but I do the syndications out of state. And so it's to work with clients who need assistance in overseeing the property management and asset managing of the different apartment buildings that they have, and to bring that expertise because that's my background out here in California.
Let's talk a little bit about the refinance that we just finished. And wow, what an amazing feat that we went through. Tell us a little bit about the property that you brought to Old Capital and why you brought it to Old Capital. What was the situation?
It was a property that an asset manager earlier this year, and it has quite a little bit of a history. It had gone under contract late in 2018, and then Hurricane Michael hit it. The investors had to regroup and decide if they still wanted to invest in it because it hit 6 days before they were supposed to close. They lost their Freddie loan thing because they no longer had the 90% occupancy. They did go ahead and do that, and under the bridge loan, they had to get up to a 90% occupancy before they could go into a Freddie loan that they had qualified before. And so the struggle was, besides repairing the damage that had been caused by the hurricane, was getting that occupancy for 90 days. So 90% occupancy for 90 days consecutive. And so they would get it for a month or two, and then all of a sudden it would go down and then had to go up, and we're having issues. So a lot of those leases were up, and we did not want those tenants because they weren't paying or weren't good tenants. And so I had to replace them and work with the property management company, which didn't quite understand the urgency of getting things turned quickly. And then went back to see if we could work with the Freddie loan that they had and what they were offering. And because of the pandemic, COVID, the terms have become much more stricter, and the qualifications. And so the loan value was different. And so Freddie could not give us what we needed to be able to refinance the loan at like a 65% loan to value. And so I went searching, and I had met Julie at another function or event and had kept in contact with her, and she had worked with me on underwriting other deals that were putting out there. And so came with her and said, hey, what can you do for us? And she brought Old Capital and brought this, and they brought us a presentation that they could do a 75 loan to value or a LTC, a loan to cost, at 85%, which was even better. And so that's when we said, okay, but we got hit to a different challenge at that point, because one of the main challenges, like you said, overall was the time constraint that we had. Because we basically, when we came to you, said, hey, Julie, we have basically, like 45 days until we have to close. Otherwise, our loan extension expires. And there's a lot of penalties if we don't get it and we default. And you came back and said, let me talk to my lenders. And they said they could do it. And so we went for it. And through the course of that, after getting the basic information to you, that got to the lender, one of the things is an ALTA survey. Most lenders, in my understanding, prefer ALTA surveys because it's just a much more detailed survey and gives more complete information. And basically, because of the timeline, you're dealing with third-party vendors, getting onto their schedule. And as I said, an ALTA survey is so much more detailed because besides just surveying the lot, they have to survey actually the square measurements of the buildings and any other structure on the lot and put those up. And there's I'm not a surveyor, but I just know there's a lot more components that go into it in the time to do that. And when we reached out to the survey company that had actually done the previous survey were booked up for like 3 weeks. And, so it's just like, how do we get around that? And we went through and looked from the seller. They had gotten an Alta survey commitment. And so we were able to work with the lender, and they were able to accept that commitment letter. And so that was we were able to get that issue handled at that time.
Also talk about another challenge that we had, who was bringing the net worth and liquidity to the property.
Guarantor had requested a forbearance, which
that's right,
was legally perfectly had a right to do.
Right.
Was in the investor's business and was being proactive for their business. And so they were looking at that aspect of their life versus this other entity that they're involved in. And so getting that information and documentation from the forbearance, from his mortgage for his business. So getting that information, because all that's new for everybody in this. So that was an additional challenge on that, because
right.
Everything was not clear when all this went into effect. There's no standards. There's no how, what's the information, what documents do you sign, what documents are given to you and such. And so tracking that down, getting that information, understanding exactly what was needed. And because of this pandemic, the lenders are really being conservative and wanting to make sure everything lined up and going to that, which also brought us to other issues and details, which I know.
Yeah, it seemed like when we would bring in one item and think, okay, we're done with that, and then we'd get the feedback, and it was like, okay, 4 new items we have to go after. And so really, thinking about this, 45 days was a really short amount of time, with the maturity date really right on top. We were right on top of that maturity date. That, just thinking about that again, thinking in advance of how we could try and take that down a little earlier so we're not scrambling. So another challenge that we had was in that whole paperwork scenario, we also saw that our org chart was also had shifted, and so that took some time as well. The shares of the Class A and Class B, right? There was that issue as well.
Yeah, no, it's just basically keeping the details. The amendments are made to PPMs or operating agreements, and so updating the organizational charts that reflects those changes. If a Class A member sold some shares and went to somebody else, or a Class B member, then going back and updating your documentation, and so we sent what we had or what was given to me. And then when they looked at it and said, wait a second, this doesn't match what's in the OA and the amendments that you provided us, so we had to go back and update the organizational charts, and actually in a little bit of a different format than we had originally done to what the lender wanted. And they, they were very generous in the sense of providing us examples so that we could match something that they wanted. And so we had to go back and redo the organizational charts, put in the information that they wanted to be able to see, and so it matched the OA and the amendments that were there. And so it reflected all the Class A members and their percentages, and all the Class B members and their percentages.
And that was all like a couple days before we found out, right before we were getting the commitment letter and the term sheet that here it is, we got to get this done. And you had gotten a hold of your attorney, and then the attorneys worked together to try and iron out all of the details. Another challenge that came up was the occupancy. So here we are in COVID, we cannot evict people. We have some delinquencies that we had to hold on to and make sure that we had them documented. And there were people that were moving in and people moving out, and now more people moving in, and trying to get all that paperwork solidified, because 45 days, there was a lot of changes that took place. And so when we went into this, it was 93% occupied, or maybe even 96. And then, no eviction. And we knew that there was a guy that needed to be evicted, and we kept checking on him. And then 2 days before we got our commitment letter, he moves out. It's like, no, don't move out, right? I mean, is that the worst case? Like, you don't want your evicted people to move out. And so this really was quite a challenge because we needed to show that when we pulled the rent roll that we had 90% and it came up 87.5. Well, thank goodness they had been showing the property and had some folks lined up, but we needed to get somebody in there that day in order to close on time. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that whole, you really worked so closely with the owner of the building, and he was just phenomenal in getting the information and understanding that this really needed to be a priority to get them in. So tell us a little bit about that.
We had to maintain a 90% physical occupancy. So throughout it, basically we had unit turns where people were moving out, and then we needed to redo the units before new people could move in. But on this case, we happened to have basically that final week, the whole month, we had over the 90%. 3 vacant units because we had some people who were not scheduled to move out, and we had to turn those units, and we had some applicants that were ready, but they had not moved in yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you had mentioned, we had an eviction tenant that was in the apartment, had not been paying rent since earlier in the year, and had notified us that they were moving out and vacating, basically just vacated and left their unit, and their unit was a mess. So we couldn't even at this time be able to rent it because it wasn't, it had to be turned. So when we had to give the latest update to the lender on what our occupancy, because usually you do it for the month and you're fine, but they were doing it through the week as the last, every week they wanted a new update on where the occupancy was. Yeah. And so when we had it, and I had to give them that we basically had 4 vacant units then, though, and we had applicants, they just weren't in. We rushed. I talked with the managing member because he happens to live in the same town, and he had been talking to somebody, and so we were able to scramble. We learned about it Monday night, and by Tuesday, we were able to get this woman who was looking to fill out the application. She met the qualifications, get her in to put down a security deposit, see the unit, sign the lease agreement, and then I was able to send the lease agreement and application over to the lender and say, look, she's moving in today, and we were able to meet that. And then 2 days later, we got another one who was in the pipeline but just hadn't done it. So it was the timing on that, and yeah, just being, because I think of COVID and how tight this was, they wanted to make sure, the lender wanted to make sure that the occupancy was there. And it just happened to, the 2 days or whatever that it fell on, that they needed the information, it was provided there. But that's when you work with a great team, and Old Capital, Julie was great on keeping us updated on what we need and how we can get this resolved, and working with her contacts with the lender and how we, and pushing them to go forward. Because to me, another one was closing at the end of the month was a real challenge, because there's a pipeline, and we're certainly not the only people trying to get a loan and going with that. And so getting that, and being willing to have everybody do a little bit more to push forward so that we could close on the 31st that we needed, so we did not, go into default and have incur a whole bunch of additional penalties.
Yeah, I mean, real challenge there, Jennifer. I mean, being that it was a Friday, it was the end of the month, and your maturity date, there are 3 very, very large challenges. And so here we are, it's Wednesday, we're really saying, can we close on Friday? Is this gonna work? And Jennifer said, I know we're gonna do it. We just have to have positive thoughts, and we're gonna do this, and this is gonna happen. And Friday came, and we were able to close. And now let's talk a little bit about, yeah, we did the dance. But Jennifer, at the end of the day, we had said we were going to be at 3.7. That's what we committed to on the interest rate. And what did we came in at 3.59. So we decreased the rate. And what a great surprise. We weren't aware of that until, 3 days before closing. So, not only were we closing, but we also got a great rate. And so you know, all the challenges, and just so you all know that you will be in contact with your lender every day. I mean, Jennifer and I were jumping on calls, you know, making sure everything was in place, making sure that the labeling of the documents were exactly, and putting them into a Google Drive, and everybody had their eyes on it. So it's really, really important that you buy in. You buy in as the investor that it is work. This doesn't just happen. You have to have patience. Of course, there's a lot of pressure to get this thing closed. You've got a contract in place. You've got a maturity date. So patience is what you need when it comes to a tight timeline, COVID, and you know, we are just so thankful that we have a great lender that we work with, and other lenders as well as a great relationship with our investors. Jennifer, you were fantastic. What would you say was the most challenging that you could share with others to, you know, be aware of and to really focus on?
Yeah, it's just following up and working. Okay, this is our deadline. They're working with us. Then we need to work with the lender so that they can get what they need done. And looking at it as a team versus them versus us. Well, you know,
Yeah.
have moments of a little pushback like we all
A
do.
little patience,
But
you know, and I think what I would want to say is, you know, the challenge of being able to have one person that was in Florida and two people in California, and one doesn't have a desk job, so he has to, you know, at the end of the day, or has to run home and print things out and scan them and send them to you. It's a lot. It's a lot of patience for everybody, and I would just encourage everybody to have the discussions and to be open, and that you know, we're all here with a goal in mind, which is to get you that property or do the refinancing and get it off of your existing lender's books. Hey, I want to just thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time and your business. Our relationship is wonderful and good, and I would tell you that Old Capital is a relationship lender. We are all about helping people, not only being the largest partner in the deal as we bring 70, 75, 80% of the deal, but we also are helping our clients find deal sponsors, helping them find the LPs for their deals, helping them bring in equity partners. So I encourage you, if you have any questions, Jennifer, how can we reach you?
my company is ITW Consulting Inc. And they can reach me at my email address, which is itwconsultingllc@gmail.com. Or they can by phone, which is 310-874-7637. And I can help people nationwide. I am based in California, but as you say, it's worked with us in Florida, and just, you know, setting up depending on the different services that I can provide for people. If it's helping with the asset managing, with the property management, or with refi, or different, you know, there's different services that I can provide to investors or syndicators if they want
Fabulous.
assistance.
That's fabulous. I really appreciate your time. And for Old Capital, I'm Julie Ann Peterson. My number is 972-833-2774. I'm here to help if we can be of service on any of the relationships. I'm looking forward to helping you where we can. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.